Savannah Guthrie's mom, Nancy, has been taken from her home, seemingly against her will. We now have that video from the front door. We've got blood on the front steps. Was this a crime for ransom or a crime of fame? Or maybe something different altogether? Well, Josh and I are going to talk about it today. Welcome to No Contest, the Colesrud, King, and Reed report. You are here with two-thirds of that trio today, Josh Colesrud and myself, Claudia King. Josh, how are you today?
Oh, I'm great. It's so good to be here. We missed last week and I was missing you guys. And, so much has happened, especially with this case. And I cannot wait to talk about all of the theories, including my own, and just really see what our listeners think about it.
I agree. And I'm going to throw a little tidbit out there. Josh has some amazing theories that we are going to drop today. And here's the thing, Josh. So I also missed you last week, and I thought, well, crap, there's no way we're going to be able to do this case because, like, it's going to be done and over with. We're going to have to figure out, like, somebody else is going to have to get murdered that we're going to have to talk about. And yet, here we are still able to talk about this case. So I want to run through a little timeline, but first, what are your thoughts on the fact that, here we are, this started on January 31st. It's now February 11th. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, if we're going to go down the rabbit hole here, this isn't the first celebrity that has been involved in some type of kidnapping and ransom. I've looked into this and, I've come up with a list of about 6 other names that have been involved in what we call KNRs, kidnapping and ransom situations. And basically, you have 2 different types of situations. And, one leads to a longer period of time and the other, resolves itself a little bit shorter. So the first type is money driven, where the kidnappers have a specific purpose of trying to elicit money from somebody in a rich and famous family. And the names that come to mind are it's the famous Lindenberg case, the Frank Sinatra Jr. case, and the John Paul Getty the third case. And in those cases, they were all money driven and they all look the same. There was direct communication, there was pressure, there was proof of life. There were not vague references like you kind of got with this case. What I mean by that is, the information that we received was that, the kidnappers were able to identify the Apple Watch and its location in the bedroom. And they were also able to identify, the broken fog light in the backyard. But those are observational, really. And it's more like a person trying to show someone that they know more than they know. If you kidnap somebody, the best thing to do to show proof of life is to give a personal anecdote that only the family members would know, or an inside joke, something like that. And you just didn't get that, or at least we're not aware that they did. So I've been a little suspicious from the very beginning that this wasn't about money. And we'll get into that in a little bit as well with the Bitcoin and how easily that could be traced. And if you're going to have any type of money transaction, it just doesn't seem like the best type of currency that you'd want to use to get away with it. So the other type of kidnapping and ransom, KNR, is the distraction and also what's it called? When you have a cause, the ideology, excuse me.
Yes.
So the first is and I think this is more akin to this, is the JonBenet Ramsey case. In JonBenet Ramsey, you also had a letter, and the letter really took the focus of the entire criminal investigation. It was theatrical almost. And you kind of have that here, where you have these kidnappers who send the letters, not to the family, but to media organizations. And why would you send anything to a media organization unless you want it publicized? You want it in the media. And unlike sending it to the family, where you want to get your money and you want to build a little bit of rapport, you want to prove to them that you can be trusted to a certain extent so you can get your money. So sending these notes to a media company is also a major red flag that this wasn't really about money. And then finally, we have the Patty Hearst situation, where that's a different category altogether, where it really was about ideology. And there aren't really any facts or evidence so far that would point to that in this case. So if I had to pigeonhole Nancy Guthrie, it would be more in the line of the JonBenet Ramsey case, which, to many people is still unsolved. And, in this case, I know this is kind of a long answer, it's the reason why this has taken so long. So, we can get into that. Like, where would you want to go from here?
Let me very quickly give a little timeline for anybody who isn't familiar with the timeline. So I'm going to run through that real quick, and then I want to ask you a question, and then and then you're going to jump right in, because again, another spoiler alert, Josh has some amazing things to say about why he thinks this is happening.
Yeah.
Okay, very quickly. So January 31st, it was around 5:32 p.m. She took an Uber, had dinner with her family, and got home around 9:50 p.m. Sunday, February 1st, her front doorbell camera is disconnected / tampered with, in a very doofus-like way, we now know. That morning around noonish, her family's check on her. She's not there. Monday, February 2nd onward, we don't really know what's going on, because nothing's going on, essentially. At one point, we have a $2,500 reward for information, which seemed ridiculous. That has since been up to 50 grand. February 5th, a detailed timeline was released by authorities. February 10th, so yesterday, they finally released the doofus footage, as we are now going to refer to it, of the kidnapper. I'm air quoting if you're listening and not watching, the kidnapper doing his doofusy things. And yesterday and into, I think, this morning, we had somebody detained. But don't get excited about that, because I'm pretty sure he is now undetained. Is that correct, Josh? He's good to go, right?
Yeah, Carlos was detained yesterday. And for those of you that don't know, when you're detained, it's different than being arrested. And, Claudia knows more about this than anybody, given her law enforcement background. But so correct me if I say anything that is not in line here, okay? So being detained, you have to have reasonable suspicion that there's criminal activity afoot, which is quoted from a very famous case in was it State v. Ohio? It's, oh my God, I can't believe I don't remember the entire name. My law school professor is going to kill me.
You're in trouble now.
I am, but the point is that if they had probable cause, which is a step higher than reasonable suspicion, he would have been arrested, and there would have been headlines about it this morning, and he would never have gone home. So he was detained, and he, could have been questioned about the notes, or he could have been questioned about the kidnappings, but they did suspect him of something, because that would justify why they transported him to a different location. Now, they did say to him several times that he was free to leave, which meant that they didn't have to read him his Miranda rights. So you heard today that Carlos was crying about not being read his Miranda because he told them everything about his mother. But I'll tell you, it wasn't required in this case because he could have left at any point in time and he was not under custodial interrogation. So anyway, Carlos was released. He is no longer a person of interest that we know of. And it's unfortunate because I was getting excited that we might have some movement in the case.
I think Terry v. Ohio is
That's what
the
it is.
case that you were talking about
Yep.
earlier. And I'm so glad that you talked about Miranda rights because one of the things that I often want to throw something at the television about, and I don't really because I'm not like a thrower, I yell. So that I yell at the television about is that so many people think if someone is detained or arrested, then immediately they must be read their Miranda rights or it all goes away. They get to walk free on a technicality. And that's not the case. So if I arrest somebody and I don't ask him any questions about his crime, I don't have to read him his Miranda rights. So people, please, they're not always required. It's nice. And a lot of cops now do it just out of habit at the very beginning, just to say that they did. But Josh, thank you for bringing that up and clearing it up. Will you talk about the difference between reasonable suspicion and probable cause? Like if we're looking at a 1 to 100 scale,
Yep.
what's reasonable suspicion and then where do we get to probable cause?
So if I had to quantify it, and my law professors told me never to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Reasonable suspicion, I think, would be somewhere in the range of 30 to 40% convinced that whatever it is you suspect is true. For example, let's say that you're a mom and dad and you go downstairs and you see cookies all over the floor. And you know that you both didn't take them, but you also have 3 kids and a dog and a cat. Well, I think that you know that one of them did it. So there's reasonable suspicion that would allow you to contact any one of those people or animals to see if you could gather the evidence. Now, if you wanted to raise the bar to probable cause, which I would say is 51%. So more likely than not, your opinion is true. Then I would say this, that you only have a 7-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter, and there's cookies on the floor, but this has happened before, and you know that your son did it. Well, I think that that would give you a 51% probable cause certainty that would allow you to detain and question him about the cookies on the floor.
And just remember, if you are going to question him, you better read him his Miranda rights.
That's right. It'd be a custodial interrogation.
That's right. Well, Josh, so let's talk about Nancy. And first, let's start with the reward money. Why do you think, in the first place, they even bothered with $2,500? Because, like, most criminals aren't going to get out of bed for that. And now it went to 50,000. Does that signify something to you?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this. So the first note requested $1 million. And, in this day and age, especially, Savannah Guthrie, $1 million isn't necessarily a drop in the bucket, but she can do it pretty easily. But then they raised it to $6 million, which is significant. And if you look and ask ChatGPT what and how much money you should ask for an American in this situation, it'll literally tell you, because I did it, between $5 and $10 million. So it's right in that range about what type of money and how much is appropriate. So, what the first note made me feel like it's a fake, because who would ask for just $1 million here when you could easily ask for a lot more? So I was suspicious about that. And the next thing I was suspicious about, Claudia, was this, that they demanded payment in Bitcoin. And for those of you who, aren't familiar with what Bitcoin is and what it does, I mean, I still don't understand everything about it, but it's this cryptocurrency where you pay people from wallet to wallet. But the thing is, when you pay someone from wallet to wallet, that transaction is recorded and you can see how much the transaction is. And you can also see the date and time that it was sent. And eventually, when you watch the wallet where the ransom money goes to, it'll pay a wallet that everybody knows who that wallet belongs to, and then you can catch the person. This is how the FBI does this all the time. Now, yeah, there are some nuances here. There are countries that don't have the regulations that we have here, and so if you bring the Bitcoin to one of those countries, you may be able to hide it a lot more easily. But the initial exchange is going to give the FBI a lot of information. So the only thing that Bitcoin does to the kidnapper's advantage is that they don't get caught during the exchange, as opposed to, let's say you had a briefcase full of cash. The riskiest part of the transaction is when you meet face to face, or however how you get the cash, because you're in danger of being caught as the kidnapper. But once you have that cash, it's untraceable. You cannot trace that unless they have some embedded chips or something like that. So cash actually is a much better medium of currency to keep than it would be for the cryptocurrency. So I was suspicious about that. But I'll tell you, you had these deadlines, obviously, that were not met. And you had the pleas from the family that also seemed a little odd. And what I mean by that is, in a traditional sense, like when we talked about earlier in this episode of the three different famous transactional CANRs. You had Frank Sinatra and the other two. There was a step-by-step process that occurred. It was formulaic and predictable. And here it wasn't. And you had language from Savannah Guthrie that just didn't seem like to align up. And what I mean so the first time that it became very suspicious to me is when she basically read the lines out of Silence of the Lambs. You could juxtapose what she said to what the senator said when her daughter was kidnapped by Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. And it was almost like we were watching a parody on, SNL, Saturday Night Live. Obviously, it's not funny, but, why would you do that? Where the entire country, anybody who's seen Silence of the Lambs, would be like, why are you repeating these exact same lines here? Like, did the FBI get this off of ChatGPT? Like, what is going on? So that was a little odd. The next thing that was odd as well was Savannah Guthrie's video on Sunday. So we all know that Savannah Guthrie is a woman of the church. She would watch a live telecast every Sunday with her mother in the church that they all attended via online, was in New York. And religion plays a big part in her life. And I bring this up because in her statement on Sunday, she specifically told the kidnappers that they wanted her back so they could celebrate her life, and that she was valuable to them, almost like what you would hear if somebody isn't alive anymore, and that you want the body back. This is a celebration of life, which is a very Christian thing to do, and it's a very Christian phrase to say when somebody dies. And so again, when we're talking about motivation, these are the things that pop up that raise red flags to me about, what is really going on here. Now, we don't know yet, and maybe it was money because we don't have the full picture. But it doesn't mean that we should put our head in the ground about other things that could be causing this. And I brought something up on Nancy Grace on Monday, which was shut down immediately and not discussed by the panel, which I was a little surprised at, because just because you have a theory that nobody likes doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about it. At least prove me that I'm wrong. And I'm not saying that I'm right, but I'm saying that we should talk about it. And that is, if the motivation was to distract the public or gain notoriety, like in the JonBenet Ramsey case, what has happened in the last 2 to 3 weeks where rich and powerful people have been thrust into the limelight and their names dragged through the mud? Well, we all know it's the Epstein files. And you have a lot of rich and powerful people that do not want their names in the headlines anymore. Now, again, I'm not saying this is right, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't bring it up and talk about. So, would it be beyond somebody who is evil enough to go to Epstein Island and, sexually assault young children, to believe that they wouldn't go to such lengths to keep their names out of the media? I mean, you tell me. Because you know what we're not talking about right now? The Epstein files.
That's
In
right.
fact, every station in the morning, at lunchtime, and at night is talking about Nancy Guthrie. And it's just something to think about. Again, I don't know that I'm right. I don't know that I'm wrong either, but we shouldn't shut down conversation just because you don't like what I'm saying. What do you think?
I think it's brilliant that you even thought that, because you are 100% correct that that has gone away. That has gone to the wayside. Nobody suddenly is talking about that list, the names. We're not talking about Bill Gates wanting to secretly give his wife medication for an STD. All that's gone now because we're focused on this.
Exactly.
If, yeah, so if this is right, if this is true, how long do you think we're going to keep playing this out?
Well, exactly. So as long as possible, if you're one of them. And that's the brilliance of sending the notes to the media companies. They have like this drip of information that they provide, almost like breadcrumbs, and the media can't help themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they're keeping the story alive. They're keeping the story of the money motivation alive for as long as possible. And again, if you want to change the narrative, how better to do that than this? And again, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying think about it. Prove me wrong. And we all used to say until yesterday that this was a professional job. Everybody agreed on that because it appeared they didn't leave any evidence, and it was honestly brilliantly executed because they weren't caught. And not only not caught, but they made law enforcement seem very foolish. And, yesterday, again, I don't know if I'm just playing the devil's advocate here, but I saw some issues with the video as well. So there was a video yesterday that the FBI released.
The doofus tapes.
The doofus tapes. And to give you a little bit of an aside about how they got this. So Nancy Guthrie had a Nest camera on her doorbell. However, she did not subscribe to Google to store it anywhere. But lo and behold, Google, surprise, surprise, keeps the data anyway. And they record everything anyway without telling you.
Cue the shock face. Cue the surprise and the shock. Continue,
Yep.
please.
So the FBI, of course, knows that, and they most likely got a subpoena and got all the metadata. And then they had their CAST team, CAST, go through it. And these guys have master's degrees in electrical engineering and computer science. They're the best at what they do. And they sifted through all that data and were able to get this stuff. Now, why did they release it yesterday as opposed to a week ago? Well, maybe law enforcement was still, had hope that Nancy Guthrie was alive, uh, because you don't release this unless you think she has passed away, because you want to have a certain rapport with the kidnappers that you're going to be able to get her back. And if you're doing this, it's like you're working behind their back. Mm-hmm. I mean, what do you think, Claudia? Am I off base here?
Again, no, I don't think you are. I think the reason to release this is because you have lost hope. You have lost hope, which I would have lost it a long time ago based on all of the information that we had. And now you're putting this out there to try one last stab at who might recognize this person. But Josh, I know that you have a lot to say about the video because as you were just saying, we thought it was a professional and then we got the doofus tapes and we saw the most ridiculous display of a person attempting to disguise themselves and get rid of camera footage than we've ever seen before. So will you talk about why you think this person looks like such a doofus? Are they a doofus?
Exactly.
Or is there more to the story?
I was on Nancy Grace trying to talk about this today too. And again, I was shut down. There's a certain narrative out there that if you don't subscribe to it, people just try to beat you down and to disagree with you. Now, Nancy didn't do that, of course, but some of the other panel members, I would have thought that they would have been a little bit more supportive of me. So going forward, so let me think about this, or let me say, just share my thoughts. So what we have here is this idea that we are dealing with professionals, and let's assume they are professionals. And again, we can assume that they are based on the success of the kidnapping so far. Would it be beneath a kidnapper to do almost a parody of a doofus in front of a camera that they know is the only footage that will be available to distract law enforcement from looking at certain people more directly? For example, it's almost universal now that everybody is saying, well, it couldn't have been anybody in the military ever, because nobody would ever look like that and carry and holster their weapon like that. So what are we not doing now? Are we not looking at people in the military? We thought that these people were professional. I mean, if you look at the video and the pictures, it looks like a parody, again, like on something on Saturday Night Live. Like, this guy has a firearm, a huge firearm, located right over his crotch. It's pointed directly down on it. Now, I can speak as an expert that every man in the world, if they're going to protect one thing, it's going to be that area. The idea that you're going to just stomp up to a camera with that right in front of you, it's just, again, it's like out of a parody. And
it's comical.
It is comical. And the guy is moving around like a doofus. And you know what? It's like, you guys are so prepared, but what, you forgot some duct tape to put over the video camera? I mean, give me a break. And then they put this bush over the camera. Again, like, we're looking at it like, oh my God, this guy is so stupid. It's like, oh, is he the stupid one, or are we? I mean, it seems like we're like on a teeter-totter, changing our views almost instantaneously. It's like they're fooling us, like they're mesmerizing us. I mean, what happened? Like, we know that these guys are professional. I mean, that's what our opinion was for the last 2 weeks. You're going to let this one distraction, because this happens in court all the time. I'm used to this, distract you from your eyes on the ball. We should still look for people that are in the military or former military. We should still look at professionals more than anybody else, because they have succeeded. Everything they've done seems perfectly executed. Where's the DNA? Where's the identification? Where's anything? We're talking about what this guy's eyes look like behind a balaclava. I mean, give me a break.
You know, had the video come out before the Super Bowl, we could have maybe said that the bush was a nod to the Bad Bunny performance at halftime, because there were loads of people dressed up as grass. So, had it been released sooner, we could have said, oh, they were trying to tip us off to a piece of the halftime show. Well, that didn't happen, so we have to look elsewhere. And I think you make such a great point, Josh, because so suddenly we're supposed to now believe that this doofus suddenly like was such a doofus, but once he got the grass in front of the camera, he went back to being the perfect professional kidnapper.
Exactly. I mean, so at what point does he go from being doofus to mastermind? Because you either can believe one or the other. You can't believe both. And again, if this guy is as dumb as he looks in the video, don't you think that he would have been caught earlier? I mean, it's just insane to me that we all just conclude immediately that this guy is an idiot just because of this. But it's, again, if this guy is a professional, isn't a little smoke and mirrors part of that? Call me crazy.
I mean, that would be the best way to throw somebody off the trail, is to do something so incredibly uncharacteristic that
Right?
it sends people in an entirely different direction.
And that's why this case is so fascinating. You have things that are so uncharacteristic for what the general narrative is. I mean, so we spoke earlier in the show about the money motivation, which is what 95% of everybody thinks is what happened. But none of actually what happened is consistent with a money KNR, kidnapping and ransom. Nothing. And again, we talked about 3 cases earlier that were by the book, money motivated kidnapping and ransoms. But for some reason, the media is just obsessed with that line of thinking. And whenever you start going away from that is when they start trying to shut you down. And that's a red flag. I mean, I don't know what's going on here, but I feel like this is turning into the case of the century. If this goes on much longer, I mean, it's embarrassing the FBI. It's embarrassing the Pima County and Sheriff's Office. I mean, there have been so many mistakes on their end, and we can go through them. But it's like you guys are on a spotlight. I mean, you're under a microscope, and you're coming to conclusions that really just isn't supported by common sense.
Well, and when you look at another case that you mentioned that was the case of the century, John Benet Ramsey. I mean,
Yeah.
we're still talking about that case. There are still people out there doing investigations and trying to figure it all out. And was it Patsy? Was it Burke? Who was it? Was it the Santa Claus guy? So it kind of makes sense, or it rings true, that if this is that type of case, we could be in for a similar outcome, which is no outcome at all.
Yeah, I know. And I'm not confident right now that this is going to be resolved very soon. Now, there are some things that I think give me hope, though. And, I think, at least talking to some of my law enforcement friends in Tucson, The general consensus is that Nancy's most likely located in and around Tucson somewhere. Probably the closer to the house, the more accurate that idea is. And the FBI and the Pima Sheriff's Office, they didn't start going door to door asking to search properties until yesterday. And the reason why is because they still had hope that Nancy Guthrie was alive. But now, they're going to be going door to door. They're going to be looking at every single yard within a 5-mile radius, trying to find Nancy Guthrie. And if there's anybody who denies access to the FBI or to law enforcement, they're now going to become persons of interest. I was talking, or Nancy Grace was talking about this today, and she made a really good point that, if you're innocent, you would be lining up to do a polygraph test, right? And it's almost like that, where they are going to go to everybody, ask them to do polygraphs, and they're going to be asking them to search their houses, their yards, their cars, and they're going to get a list of people who are not going to like that, and they're going to be looked at very hard. And I'm hoping that with this dragnet technique that they're going to use, that they're going to find somebody. Now, if it's not professional, I think that she's going to be found a lot sooner. And I'll tell you why. Because if it's not professional, I think that they probably had some type of cell phone or digital device that they eventually turned on within the first 20 minutes, at least. The FBI and their CAST team, CST, are going to do the geo tracking, the geolocation, the geo netting, where they're going to be able to see all of the different cell phones that were on pinging off the cell towers in that area during a certain time frame. And they maybe thousands. But this is how they caught the pipe bomber at the Capitol in 2020. It took them 4 years, but they eventually did. And I think that if they're amateurs, that they turned on those things, because how else are the amateurs going to communicate? Maybe radios, but I would be surprised if they're amateurs. Now, professional, we're talking a whole new level of weight game. We're only going to find out if somebody on that team comes forward, if it's professional. And so time will tell whether it's professional or amateur. And, I'm hoping, obviously, that it's amateur.
I'm going to blow your mind here real quick on the polygraph situation, because I got to be honest with you, as a former law enforcement officer, I ain't taking a polygraph. Ever.
Well, would you, if you knew that if you did it, they wouldn't look at you anymore? Otherwise, let's say the consequence of not doing it, even though you're innocent, is to have them in your business and in your life for the next 5 to 6 weeks until they can cross you off their list.
I'm probably okay with that. And here's why. Because I understand that they are not reliable. So I know anybody that goes to get a polygraph, and I have taken them before, because you have to become a police officer.
Yep.
The polygraphers try to frighten you into believing that you can't trick it. And they even have this little piece of paper that you read that has all these statistics. And by the way, 65% of statistics are made up. So it has all these statistics.
I think I read that stat somewhere.
Right? That explain to you, don't try to lie, because you can't lie to the machine. But all that to say, we know that's why they're not admissible in court, because you can trick the machine, or the machine can trick you. So it goes both ways. You can be telling the truth and it say that you're not. You can be lying and it can say you're telling the truth. Option 3 is you can be telling the truth. It says you're telling the truth, but the officers lie to you and say it says you're lying because they believe that you did something, and they want to make you think that now this has told you that you're lying. So Lee and I have made an agreement, and you now as an attorney can officially, seal this, that uh should anything happen to the other one, our first word is going to be attorney, and we're not doing the polygraph. But I hear what you're saying. I will let them in my house. See, that's the difference. I will let them search everywhere they want. They can turn up and down every piece of my property, but I don't want to sit for the polygraph.
That's a fair point. And there's a reason why polygraphs are not permitted in the court of law. And it's because they're not always reliable. And the idea that you can always tell if someone is lying or not is just false. However, that doesn't mean that they don't have their uses. And at the end of the day, they're tools. And
Mm-hmm.
if they're used appropriately, it can help create leads, and it can help. This is where I kind of see it. If the person who you're about to do the polygraph test believes that it works, it doesn't really matter what the results are. And that allows a different type of interrogation. And I think that you can get good leads based on that because of perception. I have even less confidence in stress tests, where they would test your.
Yes.
And I'm glad that that's not in use as much as polygraphs. But they're going to start doing it. I would be. Check this out, though. You'll like this, Claudia. The sheriff's office in Tucson hasn't conducted a polygraph in over 30 years, according to reports.
Stop it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they're going to have to dust that off and try to get somebody to figure it out, huh?
They are. And I think and check this out too. So there's 6 homicide detectives on this case from the sheriff's office. The most experienced has only been doing homicides for 4 years. That's the most experienced. And, we're dealing obviously with the highest profile situation since the John Roll assassination in Tucson, 15 years ago. If you remember that, John Roll was a federal judge, and he was in a parking lot supporting Kathy Lee Giffords, the congresswoman. And, some psycho came there and shot her in the head and shot him, and they died. And, that was, his statue is in every courthouse or a federal courthouse in Arizona. You have the John Roll Federal Courthouse in Yuma. And that was the biggest case in Arizona up until, 2 weeks ago. And they can't afford to fumble this. And every mistake is going to be magnified. Now, Claudia, what do you think about this? Because again, I guess my thoughts are a little bit against the grain here. I don't think this is a big deal, but what do you think about the Pima County Sheriff, the spokesperson really for the investigation, going to a Wildcats game, basketball game over the weekend?
Okay. I mean, in all honesty, I guess I see it from both sides, because public perception, it's terrible. Because again, you are in the highest profile case that exists right now. You should be working on it day and night. But at the same time, you're a human being. And if there's not information to be pumping out at every moment, can't you go take a little break and have some stress relief? Because if you just sit there and grind it out, 48 straight hours and 72 hours, you're going to be useless. So I'm going to go, I think, against the grain and say, yes, public perception, like you probably should have worn a wig and a hat and a mask, maybe some googly eyes.
Yeah.
But these people are humans, and they're not literally working on that case 24 hours a day, that one individual. So let them go have a little stress relief and watch a game. What do you
It,
think?
yeah, I've worked on high profile homicides before, and I'll tell you, it takes a lot of energy and it's a lot of stress. And this sheriff, he's not involved in the interrogations, the witness interviews. He's the top dog, so to speak, but he's not in there, working with his hands. But he's also up 24/7 answering questions and giving guidance. And you want your leader to be able to decompress and have his brain functioning and working the next day. And if this serves that purpose for him, I am rooting for him. Until there's a reason not to root for this guy, I'm going to do everything in my power to support what he does. Now, here's another question for you. What do you think is more likely, that we find Nancy Guthrie first, or they make an arrest first?
Ooh, that's a good one. Wow. Josh,
Oh yeah,
coming in with the tough
oh yeah,
question.
that's a curveball.
It is a curveball. I think they will find her first,
Okay.
especially, if we think that she is theoretically located, somewhere within a 5 minute, 5 mile radius of her home. I mean, I'm not sure she left her home alive, to be honest with you. I think they will find her first. What are your thoughts?
I agree with you. There's no benefit now for, again, we call them kidnappers, but I don't think we should, because it forces us to only look in this situation one way, which is that, she was kidnapped and kept alive for a purpose. But it also really forces us not to think about what you just said, which was that she was murdered at her house and then removed from the house. And we don't know either way. So, I think that we should call them something other than kidnappers, because I think we're misleading ourselves without enough evidence. So, what would they find first? I agree. Unless she's buried in the desert somewhere under a cactus and a ton of rocks, I think that they will find her, one way or another. Now, will they make an arrest? There was somebody, again, who the media wants to give a lot of attention to, who claims they know who did it, and they are demanding not a half but a full Bitcoin, for information that leads to them. Now, what I would say is there is a hotline that you can call and receive a $50,000 reward and get almost a Bitcoin. Why don't you do that? Uh,
Right. Because the value of Bitcoin has dropped recently. So yeah,
yes.
your 50 grand reward is almost as much. And then you kind of avoid all the getting in trouble
Yeah.
extortion-y part of it.
Yeah. Again, so I think you have a lot of sophisticated frauds out there that know how to insert their names in this, including the Yahoo, who woke up one day in San Diego last week and wanted to insert himself in the national spotlight. And, with this guy, he woke up and he went on to a website on the dark net, and he admitted to this in the complaint, that he discovered Nancy Guthrie's contact information and then sent her a ransom note, and then was caught minutes later. I mean, he had the FBI at his doorstep instantaneously, and the U.S. attorney for Arizona, who I really like, charged him that day with two separate counts and up to 20 years in prison for each count, for the ransom, the fake ransom note. So it's like, hey, honey, I'm gonna wake up and do this, and then be in prison in Arizona, all because I'm a dumbass. I mean, what kind of person do you have to be to do something so idiotic and then just assume you're not going to get caught? I mean, my God. Some people. I mean, he's
It,
almost as much of a doofus as the guy that was in the video.
yes, maybe that was his actual connection. Maybe
Maybe
they
it was
hired
maybe he was the guy in
him.
the video.
He was doofus guy.
We
And then
caught
he's
him.
like, they didn't pay me yet. Let me go out and do this and get my money.
Exactly. He was left out. We caught Mr. Doofus. Now we can measure exactly how high he is, and oh no, we'll be able to match him because of his eyes. He's
Yes, yes. And we'll look and see how Mr. Doofus carries his gun. Josh, final thoughts, and we're going to be back here again next week, and we don't even know yet. Are we going to be talking about this again? Are there going to be new developments? Is it going to be quiet? Is this all going to be solved and, wrapped up with a bow? We don't know. So what are your final thoughts for today on this case?
I'll tell you, and thanks for asking. So, sometimes it takes a tragedy to bring people together. And if you've noticed, as a country, we're at each other's throats a lot. But I'll tell you, we probably agree on 90% of things. And this case and wanting justice and safety really for Nancy is something that we all agree on. And I've noticed that you have people coming together that have never come together in the last 10 or 20 years because of all the vitriol online. And, maybe there's a shining silver lining here, right? That we can all hopefully embrace each other and realize that we're all in this together. We're all Americans. We all want safety for ourselves and our family and our community. And that's a natural thing that I hope can honestly bring people together. So there isn't the acrimony and the negativity that you see online all the times. And hopefully we can all come together as Americans and support each other.
Josh, thank you so much. I feel like there should be an eagle soaring behind you right now and a flag waving in the wind. Thank you so much for all of your expert commentary today. I have absolutely loved chatting about this case with you. If you guys want to see more of us before next week, we will be on Court TV this Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. We have no idea yet what we'll be talking about. You'll get to find out with us, most likely. And then next week, we'll be back with our next episode of No Contest. Will it be the Nancy Guthrie case? Will we jump into something else? Who can say? We don't even know yet. For Josh Colesrud and for the absent Holland Reed, I am Claudia King. This is No Contest. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, guys.